Welcome to ProgAxia and Prog's greatest albums. With me, Andy Phillips, and Dr. Prog himself, Paul Googe. Hi everybody, it's Andy Phillips here, and well, welcome to this series. We're going to be doing some series which is we're going to be calling Prog's greatest albums, and I've got Paul with me. Hi Paul.
Good afternoon.
So yeah, we're going to be talking about some of our favourite albums, and we've sort of picked albums that are, I guess, pretty iconic, but maybe not everybody knows about, and maybe we'll be able to enlighten a few people on some albums they might have missed out on. Although I doubt it. Most of these are pretty sort of up there. Which one are we going to start with today?
I thought we were going chronologically. I thought we were going to start with Hot Rats.
Yes. So yeah, this is about Hot Rats. Fantastic cover. I love the cover. Someone told me about what that was the other day, and I can't remember what I think it's a student.
It's Christine Fricker, who was one of the GTOs, the Girls Together Outrageously,
Right.
a group of females who like to enjoy themselves and other people, and Frank for some reason took to them, and I think was it Pamela Des Barres was one of them as well, which she I think anyway, all related to plaster casters and things like that, and yes, I'm with the band. So yes, that's it's and I mean it's one of those sort of like colourful, almost lurid gatefold sleeves, isn't it? With Frank inside saying this is a movie for your ears. Isn't that a great way to start?
It is wonderful, and I mean, I when did you first hear this? When did it first come across your desk? Let's say.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. So some of the albums we're going to talk about, it was not the first album I heard of from that band, you know, but I am 92% sure that this was the first Zappa album I ever heard, and it's probably a good place to start because he's done some other stuff which is perhaps a little less accessible, shall we say that, but you know, I defy anyone not to like, you know, Peaches on Regalia, for example. I mean, it's just one of those tracks, a bit like some of Miles Davis's sort of stuff that you hear and you think, I already knew this. This is in my subconscious somewhere, and it probably wasn't, but it's just beautiful and meant to be. So I can't remember exactly when I first heard it, but this was my introduction to Zappa. I think I probably went to some of his Musique Concrète stuff next with Mothers and I don't know, Weasels Whipping Flesh and so on. But if anyone's not familiar with Frank's canon of work, this is, I think, the perfect place to start. So probably about mid-70s when I first heard this.
Yeah, I think I was. It was probably late-ish 70s. I was probably about 77, something like that, when I first heard this album. And this was my sort of intro as well, a little bit, because I think this was. I'd heard some Mothers of Invention albums before. A good friend of mine. His brother used to play some. What I realised afterwards was Frank Zappa. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I just knew it was like really, really quite weird. Because I think looking back on this stuff from today, I'm looking back on it now, and I listened to some of the other sort of Mothers of Invention albums that came before this, and they're just weird. I mean, they're just like very, very, very weird. It's almost like Kenny Everett's at the controls, you know, because it does go off in sort of found sounds, and there's like a little bit of poetry and a little bit of mad jazz, and then, you know, it just cuts all over the place. And I think this was my sort of entry into Frank Zappa. I think it was the first album I really heard, and I'd heard it. You talked about this, you know, Pieces of Regalia as being subliminal in some ways, you know. Well, I think I know why it is, because I'm sure when I was a kid, that was a theme for a Radio 4 program. I think like a news program.
Right.
And so I had heard it on the radio. And so I think that's it sort of linked into that. And then when I heard it on you know, at a party or something like that, it probably just sort of linked in. But it's arguably, I think, the first serious album that he did. Like a serious, like, you know, let's play some tracks type album rather than sort of going up and all these other different bits and pieces.
So as you said, as I said, no, the earlier Mothers stuff that he did, which started a couple of years before this, that was found sound, as you said, or music concrete and all that, collages of weird stuff. And I think you could. This is his first or second solo album, depending how you view sort of Lumpy Gravy. So
yeah, Lumpy Gravy was his first one, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And so he's got Ian Underwood with him on this, who is their sort of front and centre in the inside. So Ian Underwood, you know, was with the Mothers, and of course he's got his old schoolmate Captain Beefheart with him doing the vocals on Willie the Pimp, which is the only one of the 6 tracks which is a non-instrumental. So yes, this is but I mean, Frank, there were some people that would say, I'm not sure Frank is or deserves to be, you know, in the progressive rock genre, if such a thing exists. And you've got to say, I've always struggled with that point of view, because, you know, progressive rock to me is about taking chances. It's not knowing the boundaries. It's willing to explore, and it's evolving. And I think that's what Frank Zappa was doing for the vast amount of his career. Even if some of the later stuff like jazz or whatever it was, late 70s, I wasn't particularly keen on. Nevertheless, I put him up there with in the progressive rock group. I mean, to me, take other artists I love, Camel, Caravan, and so on. I would say Mr. Z is as progressive as them, and more so. So yeah.
No, I think you're right. I mean, and also, I mean, we've had this conversation before. We've had conversations with other people who are really into prog, and you know, what is prog is one of those big questions. You know, that we find that it's quite difficult to answer. But prog's basically what you want it to be, I guess. If you're a prog fan, you sort of know where you're going with it, and there are bands on the periphery that sort of fit into it. It's a bit like Mahavishnu, you know. Could you say they're progressive rock? Well, I chart them as progressive, you know, and I put them in my shows because I'm a big fan of it, and it's, to me, it's the same sort of thing. It's rock music, it's progressing, and you know, what else do you want? But yeah, I think this was sort of you know, the first album that actually was playing songs. Because you know, he was running out of cash. You know, it was the album before that, which was a Mother's album, which was, I think, Uncle Meat or something. Again, people were stopping listening to it. It wasn't getting the traction, the attraction that I think he wanted. And so I think it was like the first album that he said, right, we're just going to create something which is like just really good tracks. And that's why I think this album is one of the albums that prog fans cite time and time again. I mean, I used to do the top fives, and the amount of people that talk about it, it's either in their top 5 or, you know, it's a one of those that are just outside, or one that has really meant a lot to them over time and things like that. Because you got to remember that people were listening to things like, you know, Led Zeppelin and the Stones and the Stooges and Sly and the Family Stone and Blood, Sweat and Tears and all those sort of bands. And I think you just wanted to get into that vibe as well, but brought out an absolutely stunning album.
But one of the things that came to mind as you were talking there was, because the earlier stuff, I mean, I think when he first burst onto the scene, and he was doing stuff like Apostrophe and Freak Out and all that, it was way out. People were freaking out to it, man. But I think after a while, it's kind of like, well, is that all you've got? You know, you're not a one-trick pony, are you? And what came to mind when you were talking was I went to an art show of Pablo Picasso some years ago. And that guy could really paint, and he had the painting chops to kind of do what he wanted. And I think Frank Zappa comes to mind because, you know, he showed on this album, if you want me to compose, very attractive stuff, it is going to get attraction and traction. If you want me to show you I know how to do this stuff, then him and Ian Underwood are going to do it. And there's still depth and complexity to these songs. I mean, there's a track on there, Little Umbrellas, which isn't easy to play. And I was lucky enough to see Ahmet Zappa play this album in Oxford a couple of years ago. And he was like, this one's a bit tricky, bear with us. But of course, he pulled it off. But so I think it's really interesting. And I, the time machine, I'd love to be able to pop into my personal TARDIS and go back and sort of when this came out in October 69, to actually, have got the previous albums and then get blown away by this in the moment, as opposed to, coming at it as the way I did and thinking it was all like this, and then finding it wasn't, listening to We're Only In It For The Money and thinking, I'm going to put this to one side. I'll come back to it in a year or 5. Yeah.
Yeah, because the tracks on here. I mean, you've got Peaches and Regalia, which is everybody sort of knows. It's sort of embedded in our psyche, I think. But Willie the Pimp is a great track, with Captain Beefheart. And was it Sugarcane Harris? I think it was on violin, which it just sounds so cool.
You may be thinking of the bassist who's Shuggie Otis,
right?
Shuggie, I think, was 15 years old when he was on this. Jean-Luc Ponty's on here as well. I think I'd heard of Jean-Luc Ponty in some way, shape, or form.
He's been in lots.
Yeah, what was he doing on this? I didn't know.
Yeah.
The internet was down in 1974, so I couldn't find out. It took me ages.
And they've also got this track, "Son of Green Jeans."
Mr. Green. Well, that's the reference back
Green Jeans.
Yeah, that's the reference back to Uncle Meat, which you just mentioned, because Mr. Green Jeans is on that. So, yes.
And Little Umbrellas is one of those tracks that always sort of reminded me a bit like the Death March. It's like it's got this vibe of the Death March on it, but it always I always imagined it to be like the soundtrack on an early James Bond movie for some reason. I don't know why. Whenever I hear it,
wow,
it's sort of but it sort of starts with that Death March vibe, which I always thought was very, very, very strange. But yeah, Ian Underwood, I think, is very, very important in this as well.
Yeah,
more than people realise, because he's playing things like the clarinets and saxes and pianos, and on the album it's got something else. Was it organus maximus or something like that? I can't remember.
It is organus maximus, which sounds like a inspiration for a Monty Python sketch to come on later with Brian. Yes, organus maximus.
And I think that was I don't think it was like like a one of the keyboards he had. I think it was one of the studio keyboards. It was an organ that was in the studio. But it's a big one, so it's not like a portable one. So I think that's why I called it Organus Max. But anyway, fantastic album all round. One of my favourites from Zappa.
And it was actually because I thought I'd just check it out because I didn't know. Apparently, it got to number 9 in the UK charts.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Really? I mean, it's one of those I sort of looked at it twice, thinking Mr. Google was playing a joke on me. It fared less well in the US Billboard charts, but yes, apparently it was that popular over here. So,
yeah.
which I didn't know as a nation we had such good taste. I think we should give ourselves a collective pat on the back for that one.
Yeah, but I think that's again what he was trying to achieve with that, is to get some sort of recognition. He had, there's a lot of people who liked Zappa or appreciated Zappa or knew he was because he's always been sort of pushed out as a bit of a genius. But I think that's why this album's pretty important, and it also sounds incredibly thick as well. And I think that's they try to have build a 16-track recording studio. They had to cobble together, I think it was a couple of 8-track recording recorders, 8-track recorders, and sort of plumb them together somehow to get this get more tracks, to actually put more tracks onto it. And You know, when you think of it, I mean, 1969 and doing, you know, tech stuff like that, which I think is, you know, that's why it's an important album as well.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, people may have seen there's documentaries that have been on BBC Four, whatever, probably on Sky Arts as well, I suspect, which, you know, just give you some sort of insight into his mind. You know, the work that he was trying to do with orchestras. You know, he had so much musical vision. He had so many things going on in his head. You know, probably getting quite frustrated. They somehow couldn't be they couldn't be brought to life by the people around him. But if he's not a genius, he's very close to it. I think, you know, what he turned his hand. And yes, he did a lot of pastiche stuff, as people probably know, you know, Reuben and the Jets and all the rest of it, and quite a disciplinarian. Apparently the bands were as Beefheart's band were, you know, very schooled in exactly what they had to play and when they had to play it, and they rehearsed their ad libs and their spontaneity, didn't they? Down to the second. But it must have been a tremendous experience seeing them play live.
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many live albums, of course, but and the musicianship, and, you know, some of our favourite bands, musicians, you know, Chester Thompson was involved for a while, wasn't he, and stuff. Yeah. So the people that went through the school, the Frank Zappa school, and lived to tell the tale. I mean, just you know, Ian and Ruth Underwood. You know, it'd be wonderful to sit down and just kick back with them. What was it like?
Yeah, wonderful one I found. So that's Frank Zappa, Hot Rats. Yeah. Will if you like this sort of thing, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel and put some comments in, you know, because we always like hearing about you know, the albums that you love. And if you like this album, then comment on it below. And we'll see you next time. See you later, guys. Yeah, thanks for joining us on the ProgAxia podcast. Don't forget to like this video and also to leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. It really does help us. We'll see you next time.